All right. Hi, this is Jana Rose with the Rose Compass, and I'm coming to you today to talk with Mike Woody, who is the founder of 360 Leadership, to talk about issues of leadership, talk a little bit about issues of race relations, the human experience. I mean, we'll go in all kinds of directions. And I also obviously want to hear from you as a parent. We talked a little bit about that. So, your experience as a leadership trainer and developer was rooted in your military experience. So learning in the military how to be a leader. So can you talk a little bit about that experience of being a military leader and what it kind of required of you that helped you learn, that made you want to share that with other people in different contexts?
Right. That's a good question. I absolutely had no clue what leadership was before I joined the military. I mean, we've all seen it, but I didn't know how to put it together. And I did not join the military to become a leader. One thing they do teach you in basic training is those that you're going to have to be a leader at some point, at some time in any situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of train you along in the culture of leadership. Leadership that you get in the military is strongly based on what characteristics you have, what capabilities you have, and then the situations are going to call for fast thinking, decision making, and you have to treat people right. Now, has the military always done that? No, absolutely. And you see right now they're still trying to get to gender issues,
Sexuality, right?
sexuality,
Yeah.
and I would say the Army is probably the best at it. I mean, the Army is way ahead of the military services. I just found out that the Marines just banned the Confederate flag, on base. The Army did that long ago.
Just did that, yeah.
Right. And people are clapping, but man, it's been offending people in the Marines for a long time. And I haven't heard from the other ones, but the Army was like that a long time ago because we had a lot of incidents, especially in Fort Bragg. You had a couple, guy was in the military, skinhead, wound up just shooting a couple just because they're black.
Mm-hmm.
This happened probably about 20 years ago, and had these incidents where we as leaders were required to go through and check each one of our soldiers. We had to check their tattoos. We had to check any of their rooms because we had a lot of extremists that were coming into the military, trying to get the skills, and then go out to their militias. And so
how did you engage with somebody like that? What was that interaction like when was there a shift in you or even in the relationship if you knew, you didn't know that about that person and then suddenly you had that awareness, and were you like, what was the dynamic between you two?
Another good question. So when this happened, I think as a black soldier in a unit that there are hardly any black people, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
I was surprised I didn't see it.
Right.
I was surprised that guy was in my squad,
Mm-hmm.
had a tattoo, and my other soldiers brought it to my attention. Also, I did have, it was frequent back then that most of my squad had Confederate flag tattooed somewhere on their body.
Wow.
And I got to the point where at that point I'd been in the military maybe 4 or 5 years, and I was already desensitized to some of the things. I would see stuff, make sure it wasn't racial to me, but anytime, based on somebody's rank or their credentials, somebody could say something that's very close to being racist or absolutely racist, and you have the structure of rank that sometimes prevents you from being the big mouth that says, hey, you can't say that. It just doesn't work that way in the military. And if you're in a volunteer unit and you're doing a lot of heavy duty things, you kind of don't want that kind of personality that somebody's going to interrupt what the culture of the unit is to get things done. So it's kind of a catch-22. You see it, you want to address it, but then now you've separated yourself from a body that operates on the same wavelength. So the
Right.
challenge is that, and I talked to one of my other partners who actually was in the same squad with me. I said, we've kind of handled it different. I don't know what we did, but the dynamics are you already had to endure all these things. You have to be used to it, but then you had to find an intelligent way or a covert way to
Yeah.
fix it. And I definitely did that
Right.
because I'll be honest with you, when I did bring the things up, sometimes
Yeah.
I was accused of being militant. Uh,
Wow.
and I didn't even, I just said, hey, I don't agree with what you said. And people
Wow.
look at me like, how dare you talk to me that way? You don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. So it's the longer I was in, the more I would say courteous that I got. I
Oh,
just,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, the longer I was in, the more, I guess what they used to say, the more ass you get,
Yeah.
the less I had to tolerate. And so I became more direct at addressing the things. And it wasn't just black soldiers, it was for women, it was for other soldiers, other minorities. And be honest with you, with the soldiers that were just having problems with their leadership would sometimes come up to me and run stuff off of me because they could feel or they could see that I was already um, not tolerating that. Not that I was a nice person. I was not a nice person when I had that rank on. I was not. You know, sometimes I probably people thought I was unapproachable, but
Oh, interesting.
they did know that was a value that I upheld. They could see that.
Yeah.
Get into with the diversity training
Hmm.
that's out there today is that they don't put a lot of information or responsibility on the individual employee.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah. Tell me more
it,
about that. Yeah.
yeah.
Tell me
So
more.
if you're a minority, and that's what people need to do. Look, it's gonna suck wherever you go. You know, I mean, everybody's got hired by an organization, and then like that was their dream organization. Give them about 90 days. Like, man, I thought this was something different. You know what I
It's
mean?
true. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, oh, I can't wait to get here. Man, this sucks. You know what I mean? So, but but so there's a responsibility on the individual to make things better within your circle. You know, I hear all the
Yeah.
things you can do, but you know, I remember I'm going to be uh, technically proficient. I'm going to be physically fit, and I'm going to do all these things. But on the other end, I could be making somebody feel inferior to me. You
Hmm.
understand what I'm saying? So it's my job to make sure that doesn't happen. So back to leadership. What I'm
Yeah.
doing is I'm making them feel good. I have to be a good person, and I try to influence them to be a good person to me. And
Yeah.
once we have that going on, it's very contagious. When you start treating people with
Right.
respect and kindness, and you're able to influence that, you change
Right.
the culture that way. You know.
Right. I like what you're saying because it sounds like I think you're right about that. And there's you're sort of just talking about like at a basic human level, friendship, like establish a kind of a feeling of friendship with somebody, like
I, I'm
respect
I'm
and
going to
mutual
say that
kindness and
probably the same characteristics of friendship because I wasn't everybody's friend. Like I told you, if you talk
oh,
to
okay.
people who work with me or work for me, they probably said, "No, I don't like that guy," but they couldn't say I
Right.
didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So
So there was at least respect.
yes, the respect
Yeah.
part, and so
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying that there's a thing. There's something I have a responsibility on that with the organization too, where
Yeah.
I did have leaders come up to me and say, "Hey, can you?" uh, take this responsibility for the company? Or can you be responsible for this so people can get together and understand? And
Yeah.
sometimes I was the best guy out of it. Sometimes I wasn't, you know?
Yeah.
But it is hard to try to be fair all the time. And that's a fact too.
Yeah.
When I'm there as a black man in any place I go, I know that people don't see me sometimes. All they see is black man. So
Yeah.
I'm actually representing a whole group of people. And so you have to be on your best behavior. You have
Right.
to do good, and you have to interact in a way that is relatable to the people that you're around. But so that's what I'm saying. The responsibility is a lot on the individual. You know,
Yeah,
there's a
I
lot on
think
the
you're
individual.
right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Even with you see,
And
you
it's a lot of responsibility to carry. That's a lot of extra responsibility to just live your life, but also have. So when I was teaching a lot of African American literature and stuff in different classes, and I kept bringing up what W.E.B. Du Bois calls the double consciousness. And he wrote that the soul of Black folk in the Harlem Renaissance era, and expressed that Black people walk through the world with this double consciousness. And that seems to be what you're sort of describing, is like, I'm an individual here, but I'm also carrying a representation of a whole race of people in some
in
situations.
some
And
situations,
yeah,
and I think
yeah,
that and there are people who do that all the time. Trust me, there are women do it all the time. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
But sometimes when we talk about these race issues, I like to, leap over to the gender issue and say,
right,
okay, it's the same thing. It is the
yeah,
same thing. And years later, I had a soldier from Kentucky, and my other the other soldiers around him came and told me. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, what? And they said, yeah, he uses it all the way through the hallway. He doesn't even know it's wrong. And I had to pull him in. Here's the thing. It's funny. He probably was racist. He is racist, but he respected me,
yeah,
which was weird. It was a weird situation because I want to be mad, but he's showing me love because remember all those badges and all that stuff. And he's like, I want to be
yeah,
where you are, Sergeant Woody. I want to do all the stuff you did. So I just use that to communicate to him, like, hey, this
right,
is wrong. He did not know. A lot of the
right,
stuff that's racism or bigotry or being prejudiced is just based off ignorance. And
right,
and people haven't seen Black people, and like people haven't seen women doing certain things. People haven't
right.
seen uh, I would say a lot of guys I worked with didn't like people from the city.
Yeah.
They
It's
just
just
like,
assumptions all around. Yeah, so it sounds like any sort of exposure to different ways of life or
yeah,
ethnicities and all that stuff just helps people understand, like, oh, we're all people. But there seems to be something before that of like putting people in categories or boxes that we have to sort of find a way to kind of take away that categorization piece that
because I work with mostly like white men, and then I know a lot of Black people. I wind up defending white men way more than I wind up explaining about Black people.
yeah.
When I'm around a Black audience and they start throwing these things up, now my environment was mostly white.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Philly. My dad, joined the army, and we all left. Uh, but I was mainly around white people. I mean, I lived in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
Nuremberg, and Schweinfurt. So it's a different kind of, and it's funny, those people weren't racist to me. They
Wow.
thought we were rich. They said, "Oh, Black people can afford to come to Germany and live here. You must be rich." You know what I mean? They're like, "Oh yeah." And so you see outside the country that people aren't racist to you. That's
Yeah.
something that's so ingrained in the fabric of the United States of America. It is very sad. It's very sad. And
Yes.
even if we were totally equal, you're still going to have that problem. Do you belong there? And if everybody's the same, if everybody's the same color, the same, there's going to be another problem pop up. Well, you're not the same religion, or you're not from my neighborhood, or you went to that school. There's
Mm,
all kind of ways that you could put up a barrier to not like somebody. So if you can perform in a way that's you know shows people that you're valued, there's something to value in your presence. And the company now on an organization side, they should already be trying to get the best out of their people by
mm-hmm.
recognizing who they are. That's not the individual's responsibility. That's the organization's responsibility. And
Yeah.
and so
On the one hand, I think you're saying there's two roles to play. And I think we all know that And what we're dealing with as a society is sort of a shifting mentality, because um, the organization has to play a role, you're saying, to see the person. Let me see you as a person and what you're bringing to the table beyond any sort of difference in terms of like color, creed, religion, any of those things, right? Let me just see what you're bringing to the table in terms of your value. And that's what we want organizations to do. But it sounds like, I mean, you're talking about the individual has to also bring a level of, I'm going to show you what the value is that I bring. But it sounds to me like there's this other layer, which you've, you know, shown, but you've, it sounds like it's almost like a reality that you've had to live within, and that you think maybe other people of color have to live within, which is this reality of, it might be a more to overcome to sort of prove that if you are in a class that's considered a minority or marginalized, you might have to do extra work
Yeah,
to
you
sort
already
of
know you're
prove that.
walking. Yeah, you're walking into a situation. You're the minority. People aren't used to seeing people like you. Okay,
Right.
you could be any group. I've seen, and people talk to me. My friends, they're Indian. They're the only one there, and they, you can't be. Here's the reality: you can't be mediocre.
Yeah.
You cannot be mediocre. You need to work your butt off, because if you want fair treatment and you think you're being discriminated against, you better prove your value. I mean, you're talking about being a father. My kids, they used to look at me like, "Dad, you're being racist." I'm looking at them like, "Hey, you need to watch out. You don't have the right to reply in a situation when a cop pulls you over. You just need to listen." And I said, and for with my kids, I tell them, I said, put a military sticker on the back of your car. And
Wow.
I said, because that's an identifier. All police officers, I don't care where you are, they can identify with something military. Once you kind of break that, rapport before it even gets to your car, man, I haven't gotten a ticket in 5 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why when I tell my kids, I said, it's your responsibility. You have to, present an image. At the same time, you need to identify with the person you're talking to. And what does everybody want? Respect. Right now,
Yeah.
everybody's yelling back and forth. You don't see it my way. You don't see it my way. And then they just yell at each other. But in a situation with the cops, you can't do that. You don't have the right to reply unless they ask you or they tell you you can talk.